crime in real life isn't fun. And so you perhaps wouldn't expect it to be something that would spawn a huge video game franchise. But I present to you Grand Theft Auto. It was my birthday in 1997, and although I didn't get it as a birthday present at the time, Grand Theft Auto was released. It was available for the PC running on MS-DOS, although later on versions for consoles and Windows were released. And it was a top-down game. So you could play as the character and you could go around, you could shoot people, you could punch them, you could jump into a car and steal it and go around. You could even shoot from your car and commit all sorts of antisocial behaviour and crime. And it was good fun. It really was. If you could suspend the morality of what you were doing, it was great fun. And there were 3 different cities to explore. You had Liberty City, that was loosely based on New York, Vice City, Miami, and San Andreas, which was San Francisco. And to follow up the success of Grand Theft Auto, we had some expansion packs. I had mine on my PlayStation. And these expansion packs were actually based in London. They're actually the only Grand Theft Auto content that isn't based in the USA. The other thing of note is that they were based in 1969 and the second one in 1961. I think they were capitalising on the popularity of the Austin Powers films that were out at the time. And it was nice to see Grand Theft Auto in an entirely different setting. We've not been back to London since, and I have a secret hope that perhaps a future Grand Theft Auto game might give the sort of treatment that we've seen in GTA 5 to a UK location like London or perhaps Liverpool or Manchester. But 1999 was also the year that we had the inevitable sequel, GTA 2. Now, it got a bit of a mixed review, and it also wasn't based in a specific place. So it was much more generic US city rather than perhaps trying to look like somewhere we would recognise. But it was still a reasonable commercial success. And everyone was happy with the top-down approach. But I then remember hearing rumours that the next Grand Theft Auto would be a 3D game, and I remember not really believing the hype. But in late October 2001, when the PlayStation 2 was my console of choice, we suddenly got Grand Theft Auto 3. And this was indeed the one that was a 3D game. We had a glamorous location. Well, in some parts of it, it was glamorous. We had cars, we had aircraft, we had a new city to explore. And this new city, of course, was Liberty City. Instead of having different cities, we now had different boroughs and areas of the city. And we could go round and we could do the missions. But it has to be said that a lot of the time, I just went round looking at the city, trying to spot landmarks, also trying to just see what was there, what was out there. And that, of course, was great fun. The graphics for the time were really, really good. And it sold very, very well. So inevitably, yes, more GTA games came off the production line. We had, in 2002, 1980s Miami coming to life in Grand Theft Auto Vice City. Clearly a nod to the sort of Miami Vice programs that we used to watch in the 1980s. And as well as appealing to young adults, it also, of course, appealed to their sense of nostalgia. The sort of target market in 2002 would perhaps have been growing up in the 1980s and remember many of the cultural references that were made in this particular game. And hot on its heels in 2004, we had Grand Theft Auto San Andreas. Now, many people cite this as the best GTA game ever. And there are some reasons for this. Although I have to say, I think that GTA 5 probably for me has to take that crown. But there were no loading times. We had our familiar, by now, 3D environment, but we could personalise our characters. We could swim, so falling into water didn't mean that you died instantly. We had a better experience in some of the vehicles, and particularly things that flew. So this was a fantastic game, and this really set the template for the Grand Theft Autos to follow. And follow, of course, they did. Grand Theft Auto 4 came to us, and it began perhaps a slightly different era of GTA games. The enthusiasts of Grand Theft Auto as a franchise called this the HD era. So we're back in Liberty City, but it's a rebooted Liberty City. It's not the one we would recognise perhaps from the previous games. But it was still just as much fun. But in 2013, we got this, Grand Theft Auto 5. It was hotly anticipated because lots of us had been enjoying playing GTA 4. It was set in San Andreas. In real life, that was effectively Southern California and bits of Nevada and a few other bits of California cherry-picked and put into the Grand Theft Auto world. And before I get on to what I think makes this game particularly great in the history of video gaming, it broke records right from day one. It still holds the record as the fastest selling entertainment product. And it took $1 billion of revenue in the first 3 days of release. That's days, not weeks. And this really signalled that video games had come of age. When you compare them to other creative media, like film, for example, the amount of revenue and interest and money made from this game dwarfed anything that Hollywood was coming up with at the time. We had our familiar 3D environment, but of course we had a graphical makeover again. What makes this game, I believe, a unique achievement in video game history is just everything about the world that we had. So what you're seeing here, of course, is one of the characters just outside their safe house. A car, no doubt ready and waiting to be broken into and driven to some mission. And while the missions were really good, you could play, in fact you did play as different characters throughout the game, and that was a really nice aspect to it. But it's the world of Grand Theft Auto, this sandboxed world, which is just really the pinnacle of video gaming. And when you consider that this was released in 2013, it ran originally on an Xbox 360, I remember playing it on. And I had to wait a little bit before it came out on the next-gen consoles, on the Xbox One and the PlayStation 4. But this world, it felt living. There were people all around. You didn't have empty streets like you did in some open-world games. But also there were things to do in this world. So if you didn't want to play the missions, you just wanted to drive around and have fun, well, that was something you could do. There were lots of different areas and lots of different activities. You could play golf, darts. You could try your hand at a shooting range if you went into a gun shop. There were all sorts of different things for you to do. And it felt a rich environment to the extent that we hadn't really had before. The other thing was that this was the era of physical games. And in the box, you had something like this. The glossy map, and I remember getting out the glossy map and unfurling it, and this was great for the introductory experience to the game. Before you even put the disc in, you were looking at the different places, the different areas, and thinking what fun and what incidents there might be in this Grand Theft Auto world. And some people, it would appear, still have those to this day. The other thing about Grand Theft Auto 5 is it is still played by millions of people, and it's still played today, and it's fresh. One of the reasons for that is the online offering. Originally, there was no Grand Theft Auto Online. It was added a little bit after it was first released. But that online experience has kept evolving, and what Rockstar have done is to keep it fresh by constantly adding new content and adding new things to do in that online world. And again, that has set the benchmark for other games to keep people coming back to them. You know, it's a testimony that a 7.5-year-old game is still a game that people want to play today, because it is. But of course, I can't really talk about Grand Theft Auto without addressing the controversy. And controversy there most certainly has been. Grand Theft Auto has been linked to acts of violence in the real world. Now, we're a little bit more nuanced about this sort of thing these days. the difference between correlation and causality seems to be better understood by the general public. But you can see, for example, the picture from Grand Theft Auto 5 of the young lady in the bottom left corner that's shown in that Observer article. There are certain things in the game that certainly feel a little bit old-fashioned by today's standards. They certainly feel very politically incorrect. But we've also got to remember that this game was an 18 certificate. This was not aimed or designed for children. People that had this moral outrage that children were going to be scarred by this in some mental way, well, children shouldn't be playing it. Of course, that didn't stop certainly teenagers from playing it. I think you'll probably find around that time many teenagers, sort of 14, 15-year-old, typically teenage boys, 14, 15-year-old and above, they somehow managed to get their hands on the game and play it. But it is an 18, and that was also significant, particularly in 1997. It's hard to believe that that top-down game also carried an 18 certificate. And it signalled something. It signalled that video games were for grown-ups. There were still some people that thought that games consoles were toys, that gaming was something that you bought in your local toy shop, something that children did, that perhaps you just grew out of it when you became a teenager or a young adult. But here was a game that said no. This is a cultural art form that deserves to be exposed and played by adults. And at the time, certainly in the late 90s, at that time, the average age of a gamer was creeping into the mid-20s. I think nowadays it's more like the mid to late 30s as people that play games have got older and older. So there was something important signalled by that 18 certificate. Video games had come of age. So at this point, I'll typically give you a playthrough. And I am going to do a playthrough of Grand Theft Auto, but it will be a separate video, so please look out for that on my channel. I won't be doing a completely unedited one because clearly I want this channel to be a bit family friendly, and Grand Theft Auto 5 is not a family friendly game, so I'll warn you now, there will be some editing and some of the naughty words will be taken out. But if you've enjoyed this little retrospective of the Grand Theft Auto series and it's brought back a few memories to you, then please consider subscribing to my channel, Gen1Gamer. You can use the subscribe button that should appear on screen now, or the button that's in my channel's homepage. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I look forward to seeing you online again soon. Bye for now.